Hey everybody, Eric Grenier here with Philippe J. Fournier for this week's episode of The Numbers, and we got lots of numbers this week. We'll get into it in the details of what actually happened, but I'd love to know, how was Quebec City on the weekend?
I made a trip out of it. It was really nice. Downtown Quebec City. My wife and I went for dinner. Quebec City is really beautiful. Of course, it's a huge suburbs. Don't get me started on Quebec City, but the city itself is beautiful, and the convention was a lot of fun. I was surprised how much enthusiasm there was. We'll see how well placed that enthusiasm is, but and it was also an exciting result. Monsieur Rodriguez came out with the winner, but it was close, so we'll talk about that later. But how are you, Eric? How are you doing these days?
I'm doing great. It's starting to feel like the summer. We're actually just literally days away from the summer, so that's always fun. Going into it in style. Going to be a fun year, quieter 12 months. We'll see.
We'll see.
We'll see, yeah. Well, that's actually what we can talk about right into it. We're going to slide right into the potential controversy or drama that we could have over the next 12 months. So as I said, we got the Liberal leadership in Quebec that we'll talk about. We got lots of provincial numbers. But first, I want to spend a little bit on the federal scene and primarily what's happening with the official opposition party. So Pierre Poilievre just came out this week. The Globe and Mail reported it, that he will be facing his leadership vote in January in Calgary. January anywhere to me is always like, limiting travel, making sure it's pretty focused on who's going to attend. But there will be a leadership vote. Now, these leadership votes have to take place for the Conservatives, and I think for every party, after an election when you don't win the election, right? When you win the election, they don't have a leadership vote to see if you should stick around. But when you lose the election, there's a leadership vote. So Pierre Poilievre has to face that. His two predecessors, Andrew Scheer and Aaron O'Toole, were booted out of the party before the members could have a say on it. So this could be the first time that we have this kind of vote for, I think, since Stephen Harper had it when he lost in 2004.
Yeah.
So is he in any trouble? What do you think?
Yeah. What do you make of the timing and the location? Because I remember when Mulcair got the boot from the NDP, I remember a lot of people, especially in Quebec, the NDP had a presence in Quebec back then. It's been a while. But they said that convention was in Edmonton. That was a killer for Mulcair. Had it been in Toronto or Montreal or Ottawa, he would have been okay. I'm not sure how accurate that is, but this is something I heard many times from NDPers. So holding it in Calgary and holding it in January, what do you make of this, Eric?
I think the location matters because, hey, party members are people too. They got to take time off. They got to pay for their travel and all this kind of stuff. So, you're not going to have a lot of folks from Nova Scotia and from Toronto and all that traveling to Calgary in January to attend this. So I think that the location and the fact that it's pretty soon, it's not that soon, but it's, in terms of how these things usually go, it's relatively soon.
Could have been in the fall. Yeah.
It does seem like they're trying to get the best shot that he'll get a strong result, right? Because you got to think that the style of conservatism that Pierre Poilievre has, the fact that he is actually from Alberta, helps him in Alberta quite a bit. If this was taking place in Halifax, if this was taking place in Montreal, Toronto, I think there would be a bigger chunk of voters that would be more of the moderate conservative that maybe might not be as pleased with his direction. The Conservatives did very well in Alberta. They have lots of members. They have lots of donors. It does seem like the ideal place for him to do really well in that leadership vote. And I don't think that's by accident.
But I'll push back a bit on this notion, though, because in Alberta, the Conservatives, they really expect a winner, right? He's going to face some headwinds as well in Alberta. Yes, there are many Conservatives, but many of those Conservatives are UCPers provincially, right? And we've seen the polls. Some of them are not too thrilled with the direction Canada's taking. I don't think it will be an easy moment for Poilievre because it's in Calgary. I don't disagree with you that holding this in Eastern Canada or elsewhere in the country could have been difficult. It will be difficult too in Alberta. They expected a win. They didn't get it, and they're used to winners, at least provincially.
They're also used to booting out their leaders.
They do that often, yes.
Mm-hmm.
They tend to do that. Um, this will also be, months after his by-election. That will be in
Yeah,
August.
he'll
We'll
be a
see
local
how.
MP by then.
Yes, he'll be a local MP. We'll see how well he does. I mean, we discussed this in prior episodes. I mean, if he gets 75% of the vote or 80%, there's no story. If he gets 49 or 52, yeah, sometimes, it's a bit underwhelming. There's also the separatist question in Alberta. It's not going to go away by January. I mean, we expect Madame Smith to try to maybe avoid a referendum, but they're probably going to be one next year. So it's going to be in the backdrop. But I can tell you that I'm going to go.
Oh, really?
January. I mean, it sucks in January in Montreal. I know it's also cold everywhere in the country, but I mean, I had a blast at that conservative convention in Quebec City. I'm going. This is an excuse for me to go back to Calgary. So that'll be interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe I'll join you.
Business expense. But
yeah.
but seriously though, thing is, so you discussed the polls that we had. Now, obviously, we know that we're very close from the election. We have post-election polls, but they still do kind of matter, right? We expect the voting intentions and the favorabilities to tell us a bit about not necessarily how people would vote now because we just voted, but how they feel about their options. And it's not going well for neither the Conservatives nor Poilievre in those numbers.
Well, that's, I think, the other thing to talk about, because I got some questions about it last week. There was the new Nanos poll that came out last week, and it had a 10-point lead for the Liberals, 43% to 33% for the Conservatives, 12 for the NDP. And then just this week, just this morning, Tuesday morning, it's now a 12-point lead, 44 for the Liberals, 32 for the Conservatives, 11 for the NDP. I don't know. I'm not sure what to make of it. I feel like post-election, the polls are a little bit, I wouldn't say that they're meaningless. It's never meaningless,
It's
but
not meaningless, no.
it's that they're not maybe reflecting a lot. They're reflecting perhaps a bit of enthusiasm and all this kind of stuff.
Yes.
And I also have to say, and we say it every time, the Nanos poll is a 4-week rolling poll. So this poll is not something that's just gauging how people feel this week. It's gauging how people felt mid-May, and tends to fluctuate a lot. If you look at the charts on the Nanos website or on the PDFs they put out every week, it's a heartbeat chart that goes up and down like this by 5 or 10 points every couple of weeks. So I'm not sure if it's enough to really think that the Conservatives are in a lot of trouble. Is this just the low point of that usual up and down, or is this a new point from where they'll start their up and down? I don't know. But I do think that some of the, there's always complaints about the behaviors of the media when it comes to the polls in an election campaign.
Yeah.
Outside of an election campaign, when you only have really one poll that you can really bank anything on, I mean, I don't think you need to make some big declarative statements about how much trouble the Conservatives are in.
No, that's true, and that's fair. However, it's 250 cases per week, but those past 4 weeks that yield this result that you said, 44 Liberal, 32 Conservatives, 11 NDP, it's been also gradual. So, 2 weeks ago it was, I think it was 41-36, and then, as you said, 43-33, and now 44-32. So there's a slope there, and again, like when you ask about voting intentions so close to an election, you can have weird results. But 50% of respondents choose Carney as their best PM. This is not an accident. We have seen for 4 straight weeks now, 47s, 48s, 46, and now 50. So, I mean, okay, just for a second, think about this, Eric. If those numbers from Nanos showed us the Conservatives +7, would it tell us anything? We would be careful, but it would tell us that Carney has a rough start. And he doesn't. Carney is well into a honeymoon. all the numbers, even those aside from the voting intentions, tell us that right now most Canadians are really happy with the result. Of course, Conservatives aren't. But if Poilievre is the choice of 24% of respondents, that means he, as preferred PM, he doesn't even get the Conservative base.
I do think those numbers might be more important than the voting intentions one, because there it is more of a, it's not about who you're going to vote for when people aren't really thinking about who they would vote for, because the next election is who knows how long, but it's certainly not in the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
But when you are comparing two leaders, I think that does suggest that Poilievre himself has maybe some problems. I'm not convinced that what was that?
That was my phone. I'm sorry.
I'm not convinced that
morning.
the
We'll get to
Conservatives. I'm not convinced that the Conservatives themselves are in that much trouble. But the thing is, I just don't want to. I know what's going to happen in the next 2 weeks. The numbers are going to get close
Tighten
again. Because it's just going to revert to the mean, and people are going to be like, whoa, there's a reaction to what happened at the G7 or Bill C5, and people are upset at the Liberal government.
Yeah.
We can't keep doing this every couple of weeks. That, like, it's a bad couple of weeks because people are upset with Poilievre. Now it's a good couple of weeks for the Conservatives. It's because it's a bad couple of weeks for Carney. I just hope people will take a deep breath and not hyperventilate about some of these numbers. Though I do agree that Carney doubling up on Poilievre on best PM, that might be a little bit more significant.
Okay, here's a question then. So I don't have the numbers to back this up, or not many numbers to back this up. I'm pretty sure that the Conservative membership still backs Poilievre by a wide margin. That would be my impression. Mm-hmm. And I think we had positive, negative impressions from, I think it was the Angus Street Institute. Among CPC voters, Poilievre is still polling really well. What would you say the odds that Poilievre gets to January? Because he has to get there. I mean, I think the membership is on his side, but events could happen, and MPs still have a say. And let's say the numbers really don't go well for the Conservatives. It's possible. Or, maybe Carney starts to trip, and then the numbers flip on the Liberals. But it's not 100% that Poilievre gets to January.
No. I mean, we have to remember that both Scheer and O'Toole were felled by their own caucuses, right?
That's right.
O'Toole explicitly in a vote, Scheer because he saw the writing on the wall.
Yeah.
I just don't feel that the caucus is going to be that upset with Poilievre. I mean, there's an extra 20 of them or so that got there because of him. And you could probably a few more based on people who didn't run again, that kind of thing. But so I don't know. But still, you got to have you still have to have the odds for just events and stuff like that. I'd give him 85%.
Oh, I was going to say 90, so we're close.
Okay.
Yeah, I would say 9 out of 10. There's like 1 in 10 chances, I think, that Poilievre doesn't get there. But he now has a podcast. Did you see that? So
everybody's got a podcast. Another competitor. Okay, why don't we move on to that Quebec Liberal leadership? So this is a party that was without a leader since the 2022 election.
That's right.
Dominique Anglade resigned shortly after that bad result. Still an official opposition for the Quebec Liberals.
Yep.
I was thinking about this. If you had, obviously being opposition leader of any party isn't great. It's not the funnest job in the world. You'd probably prefer to be a minister than to be opposition leader. But if we just take it into perspective of which parties are the most important parties in the country and how important are those jobs, Quebec Liberal leader would, on paper, be one of the top jobs in Canadian politics because you're normally the next premier of the province, or you're at least the official opposition leader in the second biggest province in the country. So this leadership race matters quite a bit. There's an election that's taking place next fall. Right. Could be implications for national unity, future referendums, all this kind of stuff. Yep. So this vote mattered. But why don't you tell us what actually happened and give us a little flavor of what happened in Quebec City?
So we discussed this weeks ago. The point system in this leadership race was quite peculiar. So it's a system that is founded on good intentions, but it could have yielded really weird result. So every riding in Quebec, 125, was worth 3,000 points. And of course, the points are distributed to the result of the riding. However, members under the age of 25 in a riding are worth 1,000 points, a third of the vote. They want to encourage youth participation and membership. And this goes back to Robert Bourassa in the 70s, right? It was trying to get young people involved in politics. This is why I say it was good intentions. However, it kind of works if you have 100,000 members, but they have 20,000. And so if you make a little calculation, 20,000 members, 125 ridings, that's about 160 per riding. Some ridings had a dozen members, other ridings had 5, 6, and 700. But there were 15 ridings where there was one member under the age of 25. And those people were worth 1,000 points. And so it was impossible, really, to make a projection based on the numbers, even the numbers that were not published, were numbers that were internals that I saw. Some members were worth 2 points and others were worth 1,000. So it was impossible really to predict. And the funny thing, so 375,000 points, right? Well, in the end, there was 374. There was 1,000 points missing. You know why? Because
one guy didn't show up.
One guy from Île-la-Madeleine, under 25, was the only one. He himself alone was worth 1,000 points, and he did not vote.
We should say.
No, it was a he. Well, regardless, it was a he. But he did not vote. He was on vacation, I was told. And he did not vote. So
how are you on vacation if you're in the Îles de Madeleine? You're living in a vacation spot anyway.
Well, there you go. But so interesting that they had no under 25 in one riding, so they just took the 1,000 points away. And so Wow. So first round, Pablo Rodriguez, 39% of the points. Second place, Charles Milliard, a great performance. And third place eliminated was Cal Blackburn. It was quite a relief and a celebration on the Charles Milliard side because they knew it was going to be tight for second place against Cal Blackburn, but they did go through to the second round, the runoff. And considering the point totals from the first round, Milliard needed 66% of the points in the second round, and he got 59%. It was a good performance by Charles Milliard. It ended up, if I round the numbers, 52 for Rodriguez and 48 for Milliard. So Pablo Rodriguez, veteran MP, former cabinet minister. It was Heritage, right? I think it was in transport.
Yeah, and then he was a Quebec lieutenant.
Quebec lieutenant barely beats a guy who was completely unknown a year ago. But considering, again, the distribution of points and of members for the Quebec Liberals, Rodriguez won hands down the popular vote. It's just the point system made it close for Charles.
Is that known?
It's very much implied. Yes.
Okay, it's implied.
Well, the thing is, they did not.
Well, he probably ran up the numbers in Quebec where there were a lot of members.
Well, that's the thing.
Montreal, I should say.
Yeah, there was. I know that a place like Ville-Saint-Laurent in Montreal has like 700 members, and there were ridings in Quebec City. I think there's 12 ridings in Quebec City that had like 50. So. You get 25 members in Quebec City, you have the points basically. So Monsieur Rodriguez is now the leader of the Quebec Liberals, and it's very early, but he's had a small effect in the voting intentions and his favorables in Quebec. They're mostly neutral because he's new, but the first few days the numbers look pretty good. For the Quebec Liberals. And as for Charles Milliard, his team was heartbroken. I can understand, working a full year towards that goal and then losing 48 to 52. But talking to many members and staff on the convention floor, many analogies were made to the first Rocky movie. You've seen this, right? Apollo Creed,
I can't
champion of
remember
the
if I've
world,
seen one of them.
right? The heavyweight champion of the world decides to pick this no-name guy from Philadelphia to beat him, and in the end, they go to the 15th round, a decision that Rocky loses, but Rocky becomes a star.
Jeez.
What? It's a great movie, 1976, Oscar winner. Anyway,
I think I'm not sure if I've seen them all. I know I've seen the one where he fights the Soviet guy.
well, they're not that great. That's the thing. Okay. The first one is great though, but they're not that great. But anyway, the point is,
Yeah.
the point is that because of that result, Milliard is an incontournable for the Quebec Liberals. Like, if he had been beaten 65-35, okay, then, he just lost. But the fact that he came so close and was also very gracious in defeat, if he perseveres, he could be the future of the Quebec Liberal Party.
Yeah. Well, and if the next election goes well for the Liberals, then you would imagine him being in a cabinet. But we're not
bench.
quite there yet.
Absolutely.
I just had two comments because we also have the poll that come out of Quebec.
Yeah.
But two comments about the results. One, the fact that it was pretty close between Milliard and Blackburn on that first ballot makes you think about, maybe that guy in Les Îles de Madeleine, maybe he might have made a difference, just a couple points, and how that would have made something, maybe a different outcome, who knows. Yeah. But also the number that Rodriguez put up on the first ballot. So I've looked at this in the past. When there is a clear front runner,
yeah,
so people know who the front runner is. And if they don't get 40%, they're sometimes in trouble. Because if you're the front runner, you're either getting all the people who want to get behind you, or there's everybody who wants someone else. Right? Because they all know you're the front runner. And if they're not backing you, it's because you're not their second choice.
We like an underdog. Yep.
And that's it. And you did see it. As you said, Milliard got 59% of that second ballot. So he got 59% of that vote that was available from Blackburn and Bélanger and Roy. So he just needed, as you said, a little bit more. So it shows that Rodriguez was kind of close. It reminds me a little bit of Bonnie Crombie in the Ontario Liberals, where her first ballot number was good enough to win. But once that's all the anybody but frontrunner vote gets rolled up, you only end up winning by 52, 53, 54. So I think that's an interesting kind of just a broader kind of lesson from this race that we've seen in other contests as well. Yeah. So as you said, he has given the Liberals a boost, and we know this because of
new poll from Palas Data. Palas Data polls Quebec. Since it's been 2.5 years, I think. And I commissioned that poll from Palas Data because I wanted to have first numbers after this convention. Of course, the Quebec Liberals have been leaderless for so long. And no offense to Marc Tanguay, a very nice guy, but he's been a careholder or
caretaker.
Caretaker, thank you. But we know he was not going to be the leader anyway, so we had to wait. And so these numbers, published this morning in L'Actualité, give the Quebec Liberals a small boost entirely at the expense of the CAQ. So the poll, first position, no surprise, the Parti Québécois, 31%. Again, a good result for the PQ, but they seem to have hit a ceiling, in the low 30s. 26% for the Quebec Liberals. That's a 4-point jump with respect to Palas's previous poll in Quebec in March. The CAQ, Eric, falls to 15%. Now, let's just remind, 3 years ago, the CAQ won a huge majority with 41% of the vote. They're now at 15%. They lost points in every region, every demographic. And such a result would probably wipe the party off the map. So 15%, 14% Conservative, 12% Quebec Solidaire, both numbers in the averages of what we've seen lately. Your thoughts on these top line numbers, Eric? What do you think?
Well, it kind of reflects a little bit. I know that the two parties are different, but the federal Liberals and the Quebec Liberals fish in the same waters. We'll put it that way, and at least the same. Sometimes the Liberals I think are fishing a bit deeper, but the federal Liberals. Yeah. But I think what we see here is that you look at some of the parts of the province where the Carney Liberals did well in the last election. It's because they got a lot of former CAQ voters or CAQ voters. And I think that you see the same thing happening here with the provincial Liberals, that they are picking up support from the CAQ, from francophones, it's not just running up the numbers on the West Island.
Yeah.
So it's curious to see what that would produce, right? Because the CAQ has very uniform support across the province. So when they go from 41 to 15, as you mentioned, it can wipe them out because they don't have big concentrations of support.
Yeah.
So is this just putting the Liberals in a strong second place in a lot of places where they don't actually pick up a lot of extra seats, but they get enough of the votes? So now they're at 25-30% in the suburbs of Montreal, in the eastern townships, around Quebec City. But the PQ is at 35-40. And so they don't end up winning a lot of seats. But it's interesting now that if these kinds of numbers hold, we're reverting to the old kind of fights with a few extra little things that make them a bit different. But like these kinds of numbers, they look a lot like what the numbers were back in 2012, for example.
Yeah. Well, one would be surprised that the DUM conservatives are still hanging on, right? I remember many said after the 22 election in Quebec, oh, the conservatives, they didn't pick up any seats. That party is done. It was a party of the pandemic, and clearly they're not. First place tied in Quebec City with the Parti Québécois, 30%. But yeah, to go back to the Liberals, what surprised me, and of course, when you look at a Quebec poll, our listeners and members know this, you have to look at the language breakdown to give you a better story. So when I saw the Liberals climbing to 26%, I said, oh, I wonder if Rodriguez had an effect on the Anglophone community, mostly in Montreal and Laval. And in March, Palace had the Liberals at 50 among non-Francophones. And in this poll, 50. So no movement whatsoever. All this movement in favor of the Liberals is from Francophones. And the CAQ drops 7 points among Francophones. Now, before you say it's a subsample, it's the largest subsample. So I think it's over 800 cases. 7 points is statistically significant here. And to your second point, Eric, this would produce a Parti Québécois majority. 38% among Francophone, Liberals at 19, CAQ 16, Conservative 15. If you have a 19-point advantage among the Francophone majority in Quebec, you win and you win big. But it suddenly changes the whole narrative. And by the way, in this poll, it's not published yet, but we're just talking amongst friends here. The sovereignty is not doing well. So the PQ is doing okay. Sovereignty is just lukewarm at best. So the PQ will have to adjust because suddenly there's somebody breathing down your neck. Only 5 points between the Parti Québécois and the Liberals.
Yeah, we'll see if Rodriguez can keep these numbers up or if they are just a little bit of a leadership bump.
Could be. It could be. Yep.
But the next, 15 months or so for the start of the campaign, going to be pretty interesting. Okay, so we also got some polling on other provinces and including Quebec, but we'll go through them all a little bit more kind of quickly, I suppose. So we got a poll from the Angus Reid Institute. It's normal quarterly approval ratings poll for all the premiers. And then we also got polls out of individual polls from other pollsters from 5 different provinces. So we can kind of roll them up together. And we can start with the king of approval ratings in Canada. That is Wab Kinew, the premier of Manitoba, has a 68% approval, 29% disapproval. What I find remarkable about this, these are his best numbers he's had so far.
Yeah.
His honeymoon is not only continuing, it's improving.
It's improving. It's improving, and we know that it won't last, but it will be soon 2 years. It was September, right, the election? So it'll be soon 2 years. That's not a honeymoon anymore. That's just a really, really good first half of a mandate. So no surprise here. What were the voting intentions from Probe Research?
We got Probe as well that came yesterday. Had a 57% for the NDP.
Oof. Wow.
32% for the PCs, who have a new leader in Obi Khan. So there's no leadership bump for the PCs. We just talked about where Rodriguez giving the Quebec Liberals a leadership bump. Not happening for the Manitoba PCs. And the Manitoba Liberals are at 8%. Huge lead for the NDP in Winnipeg, even ahead outside of Winnipeg. Yeah. So I don't know if Wab Kinew wants to take a note from Doug Ford and go early, but looks like these approval ratings are also influencing voting intentions, and Wab Kinew is doing quite well right now.
I see also newly elected, or in the case of Tim Houston, re-elected Atlantic premiers doing very well. According to the Industry Institute, so 58% approval for Susan Holt, 58% approval for Tim Houston. Both seem, I mean, again, they were re-elected and re-elected respectively in the fall, doing very well. But the thing is, for me, the story is more at the bottom of the list, right? I don't want to say it's Quebec centric here, but Doug Ford losing 10 points of favorability in 1 quarter, according to the Angus Street Institute. We've seen some diverging numbers in Ontario, especially on Doug Ford himself, Eric.
Yeah, Doug Ford in this poll, 38% approval, 58% disapproval. And he said down 10 points. So it looks like, well, the little bump that Ford's gotten from the Trump stuff is over. Should note that 38% is still more than he had for all of 2023, most of 2024, part of 2022. So there's still a good number. Yeah. But in the last week, we've had a poll from Abacus Data. We've had a poll from Léger. Léger had approval for Doug Ford at 47, disapproval 42. Abacus had 44% positive for Doug Ford, 21% neutral, 33% negative. So we are seeing a bit of a divergence here. We're not seeing it in every place. You can look at BC, where David Eby's approval rating at 46%, similar to what Léger had at 51 in a recent poll. Daniel Smith, roughly the same thing here, approval being a little bit of a divergence there as well. But yeah, is Doug Ford above water?
Well, I think is also you add to this the Polara poll that was in late May, I think the fielding was. And in Ontario, Ford was a plus 12. So you have plus 12 from Polara, plus 5 from Léger, plus 11 from Abacus, and then you have minus 20 from the Angus Street Institute. And it's the Angus Street Institute. It's not just some clown firm. It's just a serious people. So I don't know. I'm not sure how to explain this. It would be easy to just say, oh, it's an outlier, but these are standard questions of favorability. I know approval and favorability are not the same. We don't usually get the same result, depending on the question and the wording. But it strikes me that this 10-point drop from Ford in the Angus Street Institute could be an outlier. Because all the others say that Doug Ford is still riding high after his election. But I guess we'll have to wait the next trimester to see, huh?
Yeah, because you look at the approval numbers or the positive ratings. Okay, you got a high of 47, a low of 38. That's a big difference, but it's a personal question, so maybe. But then you got the 58% disapproval and the 42% disapproval in Léger. That's a 16-point gap. So I don't know. Either Ford is doing not that great or he's doing pretty well. That one's pretty tough to say. Beyond that, we got Daniel Smith, 51% approval in the Angus Reid poll. That is actually the highest she's had as premier since Angus Reid has been in the field. But then again, we had Léger had 44% approval and actually down a couple points, so who knows what that means. What I thought was really interesting in the Léger poll is that they had some voting intentions numbers in Alberta, had 48% for the UCP. It's what we've been seeing with some other kind of numbers, give or take a couple points. 34% for the NDP. Again, we've seen a bad string of polls for them. 8% for the Liberals, 8 or 9%, I think it was. Again, I don't know if that's a real thing. But they actually tested the Republican Party.
That's right.
The Separatist Party in Alberta, just 2%.
2%.
So it's not registering very much. I think a lot of the quote-unquote sovereignists in Alberta probably are fine parking their vote with the UCP for now. So.
Yeah. I mean, okay, so if you are an Alberta separatist and you try to draw a path towards a successful referendum, it's not with a small upstart party. It is trying to flip the UCP into Alberta sovereignty. I mean, regardless if you agree or not, this would be a much easier path. Starting a party and having to face the UCP and Daniel Smith is kind of hard, but it's still going to be very interesting to see when is the by-election. It's next week, right?
Yeah.
It's on the 23rd, to see how well they do and how well they're known as well. I mean, so yeah. I mean, if they get in the teens, it would be pretty good, especially in the rural areas. But Yeah, so the Republicans are not a threat to the UCP just yet.
No. A couple other numbers just to go through quickly. Abacus had a poll out of Nova Scotia, so it aligns with the Angus Reid Institute poll in terms of the popularity of Tim Houston. But what I found interesting is that the Nova Scotia Liberals, 15%.
Yeah.
The Carney Liberals just got 57%.
Yeah. That's
so
incredible.
The voters there are really, there's tons of Houston Carney voters in Nova Scotia. So that's kind of interesting to see. The NDP was at 22%.
Yeah.
They got single digits in Nova Scotia in the federal election. So voters, they can be kind of complicated. They're not just doing a straight line ballot on that. And one other one to think about, because that is the next election on the docket, John Hogan, the new leader in Newfoundland and Labrador, 39% approval. That's not a bad place to start when you're kicking it off. And he was above water in terms of his approval versus his disapproval. But we haven't seen any voting intentions polls for a while there, so we'll have to wait and see.
Yeah, we'll have to be patient. I don't think we'll have much data, unfortunately, but we'll see.
Okay, how about we move to the number of the week? What do you got?
So I will do a selfless plug here, a shameless plug rather.
It's not selfless when you do.
No, it's not selfless. Sorry, I'm tired here today. My English is tired. It's a shameless plug of again my Quebec poll. -2 is my number of the week. So again, I said we have asked about favorability of all the leaders. And for the first time since Palace started doing this, Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon is in the negative.
Oh.
His positive is still high. It's the highest among all leaders, 38%. But his negatives have caught up. He was a +17 in September. Now he's now -2 in favorability in this new poll. It was always going to happen. We talked about this last year, Eric. Okay, so when you lead in a poll and you start leading for a while now, it's been more than a year and a half, you become a target. And at some point, it weighs on you. More voters will try to look at Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon as maybe a premier in waiting. And his team is still firmly behind him. It was 86% of PQ voters were behind Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon, had a good impression of him. So his team is with him. And he's got enough votes right now to win. But his ceiling has been going down a little bit. So it'll be very interesting to see how it goes as we go forward towards the election.
My number is going to be 5%. So this is the share of the vote that was won by the Independence Party of Alberta in Olds, Didsbury, Three Hills in the 2023 election. So I'm going to use that as a bit of my
threshold.
Threshold, for what the Republicans will do. So this is the explicitly separatist party asking for a vote to get the ball rolling on a referendum. Will they surpass the 5% the Independence Party did in an election that independence or secession or whatever you want to call it was not really an issue in 2023 in Alberta? So I think that 5% is what I'm curious to see. Will they clear that? If they do, how much? And again, I think what the number is will kind of matter. If it's in the 5 to 10% range, If it's in the 10 to 20, maybe. If it's above 20, then there's a real issue for the UCP. But we'll see what's going to happen. And those by-elections in Edmonton, Strathcona, Edmonton, Ellerslie, and Olds, Didsbury, Three Hills taking place on Monday. So we'll be able to talk about it in our next episode. We'll go over the results and what they mean for the future of the province. But for now, Philippe, I think you probably still got a lot of work to do with the Quebec pull-out. So I'll let you get back to it. And we're going to do our episode of Les Chiffres at the end of the week. So if you're a follower of that podcast, you can watch out for that. But other than that, Philippe, we'll talk to you next week.
Game 6 tonight. Go Oilers. Force a Game 7. Force a Game 7, please. I want to watch this. Merci beaucoup, Eric. Merci beaucoup, tout le monde. You have a great week.